Well, hey guys, welcome back to the channel and welcome back to, I think, the last and final video in the build of the HISPANO Aviation Bull aircraft. This thing went together real quick, as I've already mentioned in the previous videos. We've got all the wings done, all the surfaces done, turbine mounted, fuel tank figured out, pipe figured out. The rest of it's going to be the equipment installation. So stay tuned and we will get into finishing up this Bull aircraft. All right guys, last video we got all the gear mounted, the wings completed, the wing surfaces done, and we are getting into the equipment mounting. So I've already done a little bit of pre-work just to get things organized. So I'll bring you in and show you what I've done so far and what the next steps are. All right, so we've got a little bit of the equipment already mounted. This stuff I've been thinking about for a while, so it was a pretty straightforward layout. Now this front plate here that they supply it's actually foam, so it's like the AirX foam, but it's like 1/4 inch thick, but insanely light. But I think it's fairly stiff, and so we've got our gyro mounted close to the base here. Part of the reason is the Cortex and the central box are nice and close here, so our cable length will work well, and it'll keep all those cables out of the front gear. And then we've got our Electron controller right there. So there is a little bit of flex in this thing, so I may end up adding some wood on the bottom just to stiffen things up. I'm going to see how things work out. We got the UAT mount mounted. Now what I did there to mount that was I laid down some carbon fiber and then put the UAT mount over top. Because this sits over top of that NACA inlet, this whole area was a little bit flexy, and now it's really, really solid. So what we're gonna do now is I'm going to put the batteries in the nose here and just put some weight in the nose. My concern is figuring out where we're gonna put the batteries. Like right now, if I take that 6-pound ball out, the nose pops up. And so we're way tail heavy right now. So I think what I'm gonna do, get my batteries mounted, get some weight put in there to see how much weight feels like the right center of gravity. And then we're gonna hook it up to our strings and our pulley system that we've got up there. And we're just gonna try and get this CG confirmed. Now I have to compensate a little bit because we don't have any fuel in the UAT or in the tanks, so I'll put a couple strips in that area of weight just to compensate, but it's more of a guessing game right now, but I just want to see and have an idea where our batteries are going to go. All right guys, so we've got a fair bit of weight added to the nose. We'll see how this all pans out, but basically I've got a bunch of strips of weight in there, and obviously we have a fair bit of room now to add all of our other equipment, but we're pretty much balanced. We're just dropping the nose just a hair. So if we pop this guy out, take one strip out. And again, this isn't the final. All we're doing is just getting an idea on how much nose weight we're going to end up adding. Let's get the plane level. And really good. So that's pretty close. Call that good enough just to get things organized. And with that weight taken out and the amount that we've got in the nose, let's just pop the string off. And she feels very light on the nose. But yeah, if we go back here, it drops its tail. So it's really close to being neutral right now. So anyways, that gives us an idea. We know that we need to jam our batteries all the way towards the front, which is good. That means we don't have to worry about putting the batteries back here somewhere. So I like that. It's nice knowing that stuff so we can already plan for it. All right, so I decided to add some reinforcement to the bottom of the tray. Just wasn't super satisfied with how flexible this was. Again, it's not overly flexible. I just think that maybe the movement in this could translate to our Cortex or our gear gyro. So just want to eliminate that, which these two pieces of maple reinforcement will take care of that. So I think it is about 1/8 of an inch thick. And anyways, we ran that the entire length, and I just used high sol to fasten that down. So what I'm dealing with right now is the front landing gear. And I just got to make sure I route the wires and everything properly. So that's kind of the next thing we're working on. And we got to get the landing gear dealt with before we can think about putting the front tray in. So just need to have a clear path set out for our lines. All right, guys. So I pretty much spent the entire night last night changing the direction of that servo arm on the front steering. So I had the output of the wire facing forward on the aircraft, and that was not a good scenario because the wire was getting caught up in some stuff. So anyways, I ended up switching the servo around. I didn't pull the front gear out because I didn't want to have to realign it and stuff. So I was fighting with the 4 set screws from the inside, and it was a real pain. So anyways, made a new linkage, and that's all done. We finished that all up. It's all good now. All right, and also made a little enclosure for the front gear area. Now I had some really thin pieces. I think they're 1/16 thickness of this hardwood material. So I made this up, and the point of it basically is to, number one, keep any wires from getting into the landing gear area, but also if we need to create a system where we have the front wheel blocked off later on with some mesh screen or something like that to keep grass from coming in, that's also a benefit as well too. So anyways, that's all completed. Fairly straightforward to install in place. Just made it up and got it all shaped and everything. Used a little bit of CA to keep it in place, and then of course glued it with some high sol. And it still has a gap between the top tray and this the little keeper thing, but so it still does allow air movement to come in. We've got all of our wires mounted there as well too, coming forward. Just use some electrical tape and CA to hold those in place, and then we ran them through the little split wire loom pieces so they don't rub on that front former work. So all the wiring is in a good position coming forward, and looks like everything's going to work out good. Also mounting our fill system for the aircraft. So I was thinking initially about installing it down below, but I think what I'm going to do is install it up top here, and reason for that is easier to access. You're not sticking your fuel filler inside the aircraft every single time, and that line will just come down and go right to the UAT, and also it's just going to be more convenient to work on it. So we have to build a little mount system for it on the piece of wood here for the tank, but that should work out quite well. And that's a Jersey Modeler product that I get from Jersey Modeler. Alright guys, so we've got our front tray moving along here, our battery plugins for the central box and the gear, and then the turbine batteries over there. So we have, the underside of the tray looks like that, so these are all the lines for the landing gear and central box, and that lead over there is for the turbine. Also mounted our Festo valve right there, and that is our on-off valve, so the 4mm line is going to come up through there, through the valve, and then back to the turbine. So the front tray is moving along nicely. It is pretty much done. Not entirely sure how I'm going to do the batteries yet. It'd be nice to have some trays to put them in. I don't know if I want to just Velcro them to the board and then have some Velcro around. I'm not entirely sure yet, so I need to give that some thought. And then with our front area here, our ECU is currently sitting underneath those boxes. The little plates that it's screwed into is getting glued to the fuselage, so that's why the weight's on it. And so once that's cured, we can take those boxes off, and the fuel pump's plugged right into the ECU. And then we've got our cables next, so that is the next big job, is just strip, 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 crimp, 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 push, push, push on all those cables. So we need to put ends on them, mark them, and then we are pretty much ready to put our front tray in. All right, guys, I just videoed this and I forgot to put push record on the camera. So anyways, last night before I went to bed, I pressurized this tank. I've stopped submersing the tanks in a situation like this where you've got wood and stuff mounted to the tank. It just makes more sense to do it this way. Anyway, so I put a closed off piece of Tygon on the vent side, an open piece of Tygon on the clunk side, blow in with my mouth to pressurize it, and then I clamp it with my forceps. Now, I just opened up both of these and they both released pressure, so we know that the tank is good to go. All we need to do now is pull out the clunk lines, inspect them, and then we know the tank's ready to install. All right, so just kind of getting a layout of stuff here. So I installed the front tray, and my 3D printing fellow Joe, thank you Joe, is going to make me some battery mounts, but that's pretty much what we're looking for the battery mounts. And I just did this just to check the CG again. Initially I picked up some 2200 milliamp batteries, thinking that we would use those if they were a good size, but they're not going to be heavy enough because we need nose weight in this plane. So what I picked up today was two 5200 milliamp receiver packs. So this is for the receivers. We'll have those stacked like that, and this will go in the mount. We'll tape these things together so we just have one Velcro mount. And then for our turbine, we've either got the 3300 milliamp 3-cell LiPo or the 2200 milliamp 3-cell LiPo, depending on how much weight we need. And either of those will provide plenty of flights. The Swiwin engines are very efficient when it comes to batteries. So that's going to be our battery layout, and we got that sorted. So next step we need to do here is start to get stuff run through the board, but before we do that, we just need to make sure our plumbing and everything is done. We've got everything plugged into the ECU that we need to, and we've got all of our lines run that we need to. So we're going to pull this board back out, take one look at that again, and we'll get this, this tray mounted inside the aircraft and continue on. All right, so we've got our tray installed. We've got all of our wires coming through the tray, and we're going to start plugging those in. Before we plug them in, though, I think what I'm going to do is put the tank in and possibly do the plumbing. Now, I've added the GSU plug-in right down there. I was going to put a through fitting through the board, but I figured, you know what, why not just hide it down there? And with the telemetry and the jetty system and stuff, I really don't hook it up very much anymore. So that is where we hook our GSU up if we need to. And we're making some good progress. So the only thing that we're really going to have to do after the fact is mount all of our receivers. So I'm not going to bolt that board down until we're absolutely have everything done, like receiver mounting and stuff, because we may just need to lift that up and run the receiver wires through the bottom, but really close, guys. So we're going to put that tank in next, probably do the plumbing first, and then I'm going to work on the wiring and stuff like that. All right, guys, so our tank is all ready to install, but one of the things that I will do to our tanks, doesn't matter what model it is I will flush them out with some isopropyl alcohol. Now, on bigger tanks, I'll usually use 1 liter per tank, and what I would generally do is put half the bottle in each tank, swish it around, and dump it out, and then use the other half of the bottle to give it a final rinse. But what I'm going to do in this case is we're going to use about 1/3 of the bottle in the little tank and the rest in the big one. I've got alcohol all over my pants. Fortunately, it just evaporates and dries. So we'll give this a shake, dump it out in the garbage can. The nice thing about the isopropyl alcohol is it just evaporates, so you could conceivably just dump this anywhere and you'll be fine. You can get it on your pants and you'll be fine as well. Now these tanks are clean. When I look inside here, they're clean. There's no debris, but what we're rinsing out in this case is the dust, okay? And on this top tank, I did switch the vent line out to be a sideways mounted vent that's a little bit bigger because I'm not using this for a smoke tank. So the point of this, again, is just to get rid of the dust. So I encourage you to do this. Don't use water. Use isopropyl alcohol. You can also use kerosene or diesel fuel if you want, Problem is that dumping that out afterwards is not ideal, and then I wouldn't put it back in my fuel jug. So anyways, I guess this would be a tip time, and this tip time is brought to you today by CM Jet Tanks. Not trusty, CM Jet Tanks. All right, so we've got all of our plumbing done. Our lines are pretty straightforward here. We'll go through the path though. So our fuel pump sucks from the UAT and comes out of the line right here and goes to the turbine through our fuel filter. Now, yes, I know there's probably some of you that are like, man, that fuel filter really needs to be vertical. My opinion, doesn't need to be vertical. I always go to full throttle when I'm flying my aircraft, or when I'm starting my aircraft. Before I take it out, I always do a full throttle run. Don't have air bubbles sitting in the fuel filter, so it doesn't matter, guys, if your fuel filter is horizontal or vertical. I know that's a very common question, so anyways, you don't need to put your comment down below saying that that fuel filter should be vertical. And then if we look at the filling path of the aircraft, so we fill through our filler here, goes into the Model Aviation Products bubble tank, comes out of this fitting here and fills up the top tank here labeled smoke, comes out the vent fitting into the larger tank, fills the larger tank, goes out the vent line to the side of the fuselage there. In our vent line, we've got our DreamWorks high flow vent setup, which our bubble tank plugs into very nicely. So plumbing is done. We've already filled our UAT tank, our bubble tank, with fuel and put our landing amount in the last tank here. So what we're going to do now is we're going to work on our wiring. All this stuff labeled, quite simple, pretty straightforward. We've already pre-done everything. So all I do in this case is turn my radio on, look through all the channels, plug them in, and we should be good to go. All right, guys, so we pretty much are ready to fire up the turbine. Yesterday, what I did before I left this thing overnight was I filled up the first tank and filled up the second tank about 3/4. And I just did that just so they can sit overnight, check for leaks, stuff like that. We know there's no leaks in the tank, but you know, just in case. And I also wanted to see how it felt with fuel in the tank and the batteries and stuff like that. So right now I've got the batteries out. They're just charging up, and once they're charged, what I'm going to do is I'm going to prime the fuel system. And then once that is done, we will do our test run on this aircraft. So I also did the Cortex programming as well too. We are going to be adding a second receiver to the Rex 12 here, and that'll be set up in a clone system. And anyways, so that's what we're doing next. So just waiting on batteries, and we'll take a look at some stuff after that. All right, guys, so we are ready to test run the Bull. We're going to pop open the shop door here and give her a run up and see how she works. It's been quite a while since this engine has been run, probably about, I think since June of this year. So July, August, September, October, November, December, so about 6 months kind of thing. Now we have quite a few air bubbles inside the fuel system, so if it doesn't start, that's why. All right, guys, gave it a good solid run. That last run was 10 minutes and 37 seconds. So she ran really well, quite impressed for, well, it's a Swiwin, so they generally run perfect, but it's nice to have an engine sit for 6 months and fire it up and it works perfect. So, all happy with that. With that run, basically what I was doing was getting rid of the fuel I had in here and getting rid of the upper tank to a landing amount of fuel. Now, I wasn't idling to get to that 10-minute point, so I know that the Swiwin 170s are very fuel-efficient engines, so I think the fuel configuration's probably going to stay like this, but if we did find that the main tank was plenty and we could land with you know, a quarter tank of fuel in the main tank, then we may install smoke at some point in the future, but I don't really plan on it for this aircraft. I just want it to be simple and light, and so we're going to keep it in this configuration most likely, but it's nice to see that through you know, a decent run like that. I had the throttle half, quarter, max for a while, so it was a very varied throttle stick. So anyways, test run worked out great. All right, guys, so I just got the aircraft hooked back up to the CG sling here. Now we're just going to add about 120 grams of lead to the nose just to recheck the CG. And the reason for that is we have some battery holders coming from Joe, and there's some really slick looking ones, and this is going to compensate for the battery holders. Okay, so we'll just pop these guys up by the batteries. So we still have that remaining amount of fuel in the tank, and what we'll do is check and see how things worked out. Now, we've already done this before, so it's really not news, but it's kind of nice just to redo it with being able to check the amount of fuel left in that tank. So we're just a little bit nose heavy there. So let's pop that weight out and see how that affects everything. So really stinking close right there, depending on how we have the airplane angled. So really close. So we're going to be close with the battery holders in there, and which is fine. So we're going to be playing with that CG, you know, as we get the first few flights on this thing. But we are really close with everything the way it is, and that's awesome. All right, so we've done a bunch of programming and stuff with the jetty system here. So we've got our primary Rex 12 on the right side of the fuselage. We've got our secondary clone receiver on the left side of the fuselage. Now the antenna placement, I actually placed one up here. Great spot for it because it's essentially outside of the fuselage. So that's pointing forward and backwards. That one there is pointing up and down. The one that comes to back here is kind of pointing at an angle, and then the other one goes across the board right there. So that is the layout of our receiver setup. We've got our clone plugged into our Cortex, and the Cortex we've switched to a dual receiver setup. And everything's kind of buttoned down now, so happy with the way that everything looks. I think we're ready to goop all the connectors, so that'll be one of the things we do next. We've got our remote switch here to turn the plane on and off from the radio, mounted right there. And that is kind of our layout. So we've got a little bit of stuff left to do on this aircraft, some final touches, waiting for our battery mounts. Got to put some stickers on there and give her a nice polish, and she's really close. So some of the Jetty things we've done going through the Jetty telemetry system is just set up our warnings, our voice announcements, things like that, fuel level 50%, fuel level 30%, flame out warnings, all that kind of stuff. So that is, it's always fun to play around with those things. So we're gonna give this thing a final weigh as well. So right now, fuel tank's empty, UAT is full, batteries are installed. So we'll weigh this thing up, see what it came in at as a dry weight. Really interested to see that. I'm just guessing, but I'm hoping it's 29.5 pounds. That's my guess. So let's get this on the scales and see. All right, guys, we got the bull on the scales and I was really close. So there is our final dry weight with UAT full, 30 pounds, basically even. That is phenomenal. One of my buddies who had the Carf Viper, which is physically the same size as this, except the fuselage isn't as big. This fuselage is bigger. His Viper, I think, was like 34 pounds. So that is phenomenal. A phenomenal weight for something this size. So really, really cool. All right, guys, and that wraps up the build of the Hispano Aviation Bull. Very, very quick build on this thing. We started it a week ago today and it is wrapped up and turned out awesome. Really happy with it. So if you guys are thinking about a bull, hopefully this build series helped you out. If you just want to see a fun aircraft build, this thing was absolutely amazing to put together. Really happy with the quality and the speed of how quickly this thing went together. Really looking forward to flying this. It's like minus 20 degrees Celsius outside. We're in the middle of winter, so it's going to be a while, but this thing is going to be a hoot. So anyways, guys, thanks for joining me on the journey, and we've got lots more content coming up, lots more exciting builds coming up. So thanks for watching. Give the video a thumbs up if you liked it. If you're not a subscriber, I would encourage you to hit that subscribe button down below. Thanks, guys, and we'll see you in the next video.